Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on today's lesson. We're going to spend some more time in Psalms as part of our adult Sabbath school lesson, and we're just excited for you all to be here with us. Us being Pastor Sasha and my friend Eric. I'm Monique, and let's get started with our first question directed at Psalm 106, verse 4. I'm just going to read the verse here for you. Remember me, Lord, in your favor toward your people. Visit me with your salvation. Now, why does history continue to get left behind, Pastor Sasha, and also for you, Eric, because you guys are both history buffs? And how can we remember as we ask the Lord to remember?
These two psalms, which we're going to be discussing in our lesson, the Psalm 106 and Psalm 80, and there are a couple others. I looked around. Psalm 105 is about the same thing. They have like 105 and 106, they have like the same topic. They just basically repeat the history of Israel, but with the two different twists. 105 is praising God for his wondrous deeds by which he led Israel. 106 is more of a repentance, because we know that Israel was having lots of issues on that journey from Egypt, but the major point of Psalms, it's one of the, there are different Psalms. You have like different, we discussed, you have a Psalms which are like new song, which is like when they have this sing to the Lord new song, that's kind of really upbeat, something like really, really kind of very, very uplifting, upbeat. And it's usually glorification. And there are some very sad songs, which we also discussed. They exist too. Personal prayers, songs about prophetic, about the Messiah and his suffering. And quite a few are the history songs. I don't know if it's popular. Eric, maybe you can answer these questions. Do people today in America sing some kind of ballads which are retell some history?
Not that I'm aware of. It depends. Okay, it depends on how far back you go. But nothing that's telling a story from history that I could think of. Nothing I can think of off the top of my head, anyway.
The only ones I can think of is the Star Spangled Banner,
right?
Ones about maybe American history that you sing on those kind of holidays in
right.
elementary school.
Right, which still don't tell. They kind of tell a story, but they don't unless you know the history of some of these songs. You don't.
Sure.
You don't connect to them, or you don't understand where the origins of those are. So, I'm sure they exist, but not popular enough for me to know them.
Okay, so, you're not hearing them day to day.
Right.
This is a little bit sad for me.
It is.
Because as we may have, we discussed many times, that I think you would, you correct me if I'm wrong, but music and songs impacts people a lot. The problem, whatever reason, I don't know, it seems to be that all the music and songs that I hear, modern, they're about people's what's inside, the feelings, love, anger, sadness.
Heartbreak.
Yep. Emotions, yeah.
Emotions, right?
Yeah.
That's different. That's very different. I don't know if it's because of the postmodern society, but personally, to me, it was very confusing because, even when I was trying to understand, coming to become an American citizen. I became an American citizen after 10 years of actually being in the country. So I fully understood, what the candidates were speaking, who are the candidates. It's not like there are some immigrants who come, they have no clue what's going on because they continue to listen. Like in my case, I know I can't stand it. People come here and they just listen to Russian television. So they're absolutely blinded in their country. They have no idea what's going on in the United States. I did not listen to any of the Russian television. I actually listened to NPR, Fox, whatever, to get myself, intentionally. I wanted to get myself educated about the issues, and I knew what the issues are, but I couldn't understand why these issues are, because to understand why, you need to know the history of it. Like, I still remember I was listening to Fox News, and I was trying to understand why Republicans are against Obamacare. I couldn't make sense to me. It was whatever Fox News, whatever these channels were, because, I'll listen to CNN, I'll listen to Obama himself, they were making, kind of a reasonable case that sounded reasonable to me. But I wanted to make an intelligent decision, so I was listening to the opposing side. I couldn't make a sense. Why? What's the problem? And what was difficult for me, eventually I finally understood what's the problem. But you know who explained to me why was the problem? The BBC explained.
Like a documentary or something?
Well,
just the BBC TV, like a television show or television channel from BBC.
See, BBC, among the English sources, BBC tells most of the historical information. And I was looking for historical information. I was looking to understand how did the Medicaid, Medicare come about. They wouldn't be telling me here. They wouldn't be telling me. How am I supposed to know it if I am an immigrant? So thanks to British, they told me all about this because I listened to history. But it just tells me that I'm very saddened that, and I don't know from which time it became like this. Today's American society can't stand history. They just don't.
We can go off on a tangent on that.
No, let it happen because let's go. Like honestly,
There's a failure in the education system, as far as I'm concerned, where there's no real standards of understanding history. So they don't teach. Through growing up, we teach history as a set of events and dates. Not this is what happened, this is why it happened, this is how people are viewing it, and this is what's going on. So even today, it's still, everything's looked at from a very narrow scope of what history is. And we're not, what is it? I think Mark Twain said, if history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So it's and the reason why it happens is because people forget why they did something and what went wrong. So they just keep doing the same stupid thing over and over again because they were never taught why it didn't work the first time and how to prevent it from happening again or how to go down that same path.
I see the lack of interest a lot of time when it comes to, like, that there's no sense of relevance or importance, things like that. And I think also another reason that I've actually seen, especially like in like current like climates, is like the history that we've been taught. Like, not only they're taught that it's not important, that there's more important like things to worry about. Like, like I feel like, especially when we're talking about things as far as like religion, we've kind of touched on it a little bit about how like the origins of like, the Roman Catholic Church and things like that are really affected the world. But like now there's like this sense of that, like, oh, European history is not important. We need to learn about the histories of other countries, which, I mean, those countries are important too, but it's like what areas affected the world the most? And I feel like that's also something that gets kind of brushed past. Because I don't know, like what was like the world power at this time that was making the most effective change in the world?
Yeah, that's very important because one of the interesting things about our culture, like I think in Adventism, the key book, would be like, let's put it this way. Take, for example, evangelicals, right? Evangelical world, and you ask your question, which books the most represent the evangelical world the most? Rick Warren, Purpose-Driven Church. I don't know if you ever seen that one.
No, you lost me at evangelical, but I'm kind of, I think I'm right there with you.
Okay, let me ask you this. If I lost you on evangelical, how about Adventist world, which you grew up in? So what would be the book which would be most associated with Adventism?
Probably like Steps to Christ or something. I was going to say Great Controversy.
Yeah. Very good, very good. Actually, Great Controversy probably. That's the most, and when I said Rick Warren, Purpose-Driven Church, it's very popular, but I probably, if I talk about evangelical, probably Max Lucado would be, some kind of a devotional books and stuff like this.
Him.
You heard Max Lucado, okay. So, but with Adventism, the way how Adventism markets itself, it basically would be correctly, it markets itself through the book Great Controversy. So, you read Great Controversy, did you?
Started it.
Started.
Yeah. I mean, like, I make my way through every now and then, but I'm a book hopper. I haven't finished a book probably in years. So.
I've read it a couple times, but a number of years ago. So, but you're making your way through this book. So, as far as you've read through this book, what's this about?
Oh, like the fall. Like, it's about the facts behind all like the spiritual side of like the Bible that we've kind of heard over the years, but just putting all the little finer details into there.
Would you agree that most of the book is about history?
Oh yeah. Like deep history. Like before history. Like
yes. I mean, to be honest, as a pastor, I know why you said Steps to Christ, because many times as a pastor, I said, if you want to give somebody a book, a traditional Adventist book, which would be authored by Ellen White, you give them better Steps to Christ, because if you look at what the Great Controversy says, 70% of material is European history, which I don't think American people today have any clue about.
Yeah, no. Like, we get started, but then somewhere along the way you lose interest because you're like, oh, there's more important things to learn about.
Well, yes.
You lose interest because you're like, why do I need to know what happened in 1943?
No, true that.
Like they don't make it relevant to your life. And when you start looking at history and like back to why I think if I accidentally call E.G. White egg white, that's I call her egg white.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Well, very well remembered. A good,
Right.
good memory trigger. Mnemonic device.
Yes.
Right.
Mnemonic device.
but anyway, that was a tangent. So like I think, and I've never even picked that book up. None of her books. I've never read any of them. But from my understanding is there's a lot of relating back to why we do, not just that we do. So if we constantly teach history is the same thing as what we do in the church. If we only teach what we do, not why we do, we're not going to keep anyone interested, and no one's going to follow us. No one's going to want to know and keep leading our way and keep joining us in learning more and continuing what we're doing. So I think that's one of the big things is to bring it back to what I think we kind of suck at it, honestly, at actually teaching why we do things, not just that we do things. So.
Yeah. The main reason, the main answer why to the question why we do, always going to go in history. Because somebody started it, and you have to learn the history about who he was, that somebody, and why did he start it. And that's the history.
Yeah, because it always kind of seems like a rabbit hole, too. Like, I sometimes get afraid to kind of dip my toe in because the whole thing kind of just sucks you in, right? Like, you're like, okay, why did this person start? Oh, because, like, this was happening at the time, but, like, his name is relevant and his mom and his dad and then, like, the culture. Like, it's like once you kind of start a little bit, you really just get sucked in and you start going further and further and further back. So I see why people get lost a little bit because it's like a never-ending path. So, like, how do you decide where to stop? Like,
You don't.
You don't? You have
Don't
to.
stop.
No.
It's
you
a never-ending
have to
journey.
stop. No, we all hate those TV shows that like they don't know how to end it. Like it's season after season.
It's so fascinating. History is so fascinating. If like the overlapping, the events that have happened through history in different parts of the world that have interacted with each other that you didn't even realize were connected to each other is astonishing. And you can go super deep into Europe, and then you start figuring out like when Vikings came in and when Europeans started going over to Japan and when they started trading with them. And like all of these timelines and all of these things that all interact with each other and all of the major events that are happening in different countries that are all happening simultaneously, but they didn't know they were happening at the same time.
Okay.
It's fascinating.
So what I'm hearing is you have to diversify it. So I guess it's not like super important that you stick with one route and you go down and you figure out everything. So there is that sense of like, there's a lot of things that are affecting. So like, I don't know.
Yeah. It's not necessarily a rabbit hole. It's more like an anthill? Like an ant, like, if you ever seen like the you ever seen an ant farm where they have like little paths all over everywhere? Like it depends on like choose your own adventure.
I guess,
and then find another area and then follow that one.
So there's something out there for everybody.
Generally, I think.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, because I think even when we look at the Bible, I don't know if you guys realized it, but 60% of the books of the Bible are about history.
Yeah. Archaeologists,
even prophecy?
archaeologists still use the Bible to find cities.
That I find very fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
That I like.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, many, if you say like this, that's a good example, because people read the Bible like, I don't know, one of the most fascinating places in the world for me. I actually want to go this summer again. It's a British museum. British Museum houses the best archaeological exhibit about the Bible. For example, like the word Nineveh, right? You see Nineveh in the Bible, Book of Jonah, Nineveh, it's Isaiah and all of this, history of, Elisha, Naaman going down the river 7 times, cleansing himself from leprosy, This biblical story probably are pretty much familiar. They're all connected with the city of Nineveh, about which the entire 19th century skeptical scholars said, that's just a fake. That's like Atlantis. until the British archaeologists found Nineveh. They excavated it. Well, back then, they took everything to London. That sits there to prove. And there are many, many other examples. You know, mentioned the city of Ur in the Bible, the history of Abraham. Finally, archaeologists went, and it's all Iraq, by the way, it's all Iraq. And archaeologists went, they discovered the city of Ur, they discovered the remains of old Babylon eventually. So cities that are in the Bible, like I love to take people to the excavation of the town of Hatzor, which is in northern Israel, because in the book of Joshua it says that Joshua came, conquered the city, had to put it on fire, and we have a layer of ashes right there, dating, 14th century BC, which is supporting the idea that in 14th century BC, Joshua actually did it. And so, no, the biblical history is definitely very, very important. And Psalms, they are balanced. Unlike modern musical culture, which, as we discussed, addresses emotions, Psalms address both. They provide emotions and they provide knowledge. The Psalms we chose, 106 and 80, they are actually provide knowledge. They refer back to the history which is recorded by Moses. But through the songs, because, again, reading Moses is one thing, but when you sing it periodically, it sticks in your head like any other Psalms. So that's beyond, that's part of, they have like a prayer and stuff like this in there, at least in 106, but it's all connected with history. If you don't know biblical history, what you're reading makes no sense.
So the baseline is history is relevant, it's important, it's something that we should carry with us throughout our learning and studying of the Bible and also just the life around us. But I do have one quarrel, not necessarily, but I do want to know this escape from Egypt. Okay, it was like super important and super relevant, but I feel like that's all the Hebrews ever talk about. So like, what is it? Like, what was, like, I know it was like the most, like, it was, I know that it was a great feat what God did, but it's like, there's so many other like wonderful things that happened to them that I feel like don't get as much attention as the escape from Egypt.
Very good question. Think about this. Take a house. A house has foundation, then walls, doors, windows, and then the roof. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the elements of biblical history, the Exodus is the foundation. Not the upper foundation. I mean, not the lowest foundation. Like you have, first you build a house, you dig, what is it called? Not a trench.
Footings?
Huh?
Footings?
Yeah. So you just dig, where the foundation lays, you put it all. That's your, let's put it this way, the patriarchal story from Adam to Abraham, But then you have Exodus. Exodus is what forms the people of God. Before Exodus, we had individuals. Abraham was individual, and Abraham had a family. So even these older books, talk about Job, for example. He is individual. Mm-hmm. So Exodus opens up a totally different chapter, because now it's talking about the people, the nation of the covenant, which actually will continue to the time of the new covenant, because, there is a Old Covenant Israel and there is a New Covenant Israel, which, you know, simpler people would refer it as a church. I prefer to call it more specific and correct biblically, which is the New Covenant Israel. And now when we go and look at 1 Corinthians, we have Paul teaching about why Exodus is important. So 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and if we can read from 1 to, let's say, from 1 to 9, let's supposed to say. Can you do that?
Can do. For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and they all passed through the sea. And they all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And they all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for their dead bodies were spread out in the wilderness. Now these things happened as examples for us, so that we could not crave evil things as they indeed craved them. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. Nor are we to commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. Nor are we to put the Lord to the test, as some of them did and were killed by the snakes.
Okay, so we can keep going about this, but notice the two parts of this passage in 1 Corinthians. First part is just the history. You hear about the crossing of the Red Sea. That's Exodus. Like Moses, wandering in the wilderness. And then in verse 6, which is just the pinnacle of this passage, it says, these things become our examples. And Eric says several times, history repeats itself. So what Paul is concerned, that learn the lesson from the history of the past, that history would not repeat itself. So, and that's why we have Exodus as a foundation here, because when we start reading Bible further and all the events, they constantly are going to repeat, do the same thing. For example, do not become idolaters, like some of them were. As it is written, people sat down, ate and drank, and rose up to play. What's the story about the idols during the journey in the desert around Mount Sinai? There was idolatry, remember?
The calf?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, history repeats itself 500 years later. So, what happened with the calf? One big problem. Remember how they did it? Moses was up on the Mount Sinai. Can you guess how long?
Like a week.
40 days.
Oh. Okay.
And they got impatient. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe not impatient, but they said, oh, maybe he's dead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they said, let's make God for us. So they gave Aaron all kinds of golden stuff, and Aaron was able to mold a calf, which is a symbol of fertility, which is basically all about sex. Mm-hmm. But that's why, bulls, they have all this stuff. So basically he said, this is God who took us out of Egypt. And people began to worship, and with, of course, quote-unquote worship. Mm-hmm. It was a worship with lots of harlotry, which ended up into a problem. Well, 500 years later, Solomon comes in, And Solomon has his problem, too many wives and other things. He himself had the best economy at the beginning, the best, no war compared to his father David, who constantly was in a war. So 40 years, no wars, economy top notch, gold and silver cost like wood, whatever, cheap stuff. Everybody is so filthy, wealthy, and rich. That's boom. Solomon dies, and it is the bust. All kinds of reasons I can talk about the history repeating itself, because eventually, it was about the taxes. And they asked him, the Israelites asked, can you reduce the taxes? And the king Rehoboam, who was the son of Solomon, he said, nope, I'm not reducing the taxes. So the northern part of Israel, the Davidic kingdom, ceased. 9 tribes said, we're independent, bye-bye. We have no part in the King David's rule. He is robbing us,
And then they made a calf.
Yes.
Really?
Yes. You're right.
That's really weird succession. I know, I was just joking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, 2 of them.
It's a weird progression. Like, first they secede and then they make a calf. Like, they didn't have anything to do with God. I feel like their beef was with Rehoboam. So was it just to stick it to the king, or?
No, that was an issue here. So they had a new king there for themselves, up north. His name was Jeroboam.
Okay.
And Jeroboam kind of thought, okay, the Bible teaches that according to the Torah, Old Testament, all people, all Israelites are supposed to come before the Lord 3 times a year, meaning to the temple. And guess where the temple is?
Oh, in the south.
In Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they all gonna keep going to Jerusalem to worship God, and then they keep going back. They're never gonna assume their new identity, national identity, and I want them to be different than these Judeans.
This is starting to rhyme. This is rhyming.
So he put 2 calves, and guess what he says? This is God who took you out of Egypt. You go worship the calf. Don't go to the temple. So history, by the way, is very much connected with identity. What do you think, Eric?
Yes, I think history has a large part to do with identity. It has a lot to do, as far as I'm concerned, from where you come from. So every region, every history has a different origin and the story behind it that helped you become who you are, which I think is who your identity is. So I think that has a huge part of it. And knowing your history and knowing where you come from helps you create your identity, your self-worth, and yourself.
So it seems to me that what I keep hearing, even in a musical country, even in a musical culture, it's lots of these emotional songs. They are around people who try to understand their identity. Mm-hmm. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think when history gets forgotten, that's where you start to forget who you are.
Right.
So definitely the fact that the Bible itself is 60% history tells you a lot about not only history and not only yourself, but tells you a lot about the Bible and how we should treat history. We should treat it as a point of praise and repentance and always recognize that history is the base. So that's what I got out of this. And if you have anything that you'd like to add to the discussion, please leave it down below in the comments. Anything that stood out to you and anything you want to share with other people also watching this video, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss our last lesson. Thanks everyone for your time. See you then.